Welcome on a Wednesday to the movie altar that is Generation Movie. I'm your host, JW Colwell, joined as always by my incredible, impeccably dressed, and wonderful guest, co-host, Rich Drees. How you doing today, Rich?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the impeccably dressed when I'm obviously just wearing a Squeeze t-shirt
That's fine.
that I was given to by a lovely young lady when we went to see them many years ago.
Impeccably dressed. Let's go with impeccably dressed. So, welcome on a Wednesday night. It's a good time of the year, and we're doing a little bit of a change. So tonight's a special edition of Generation Movie. It's the bigger boat edition. Rich needs a bigger boat. We all need bigger boats sometimes. And what I would say is tonight's movie is one of the definitive classics ever made. Let's bring it right in. Boom. There she is. And so when you're going through and looking for posters, it's an amazing try. I feel like the shark is going to get us. Although we're not pretty, so I don't know that he's going to be going for us quite the same way. But this is a time, one of the coolest things, even looking at the poster, the stress involved in the poster is enough to make you question things. I'll give you an example. Where have you ever seen the names put out that way in quite that way, right? So Scheider, Shaw, Dreyfuss, and it's something you never see, but Shaw is slightly ahead and above everybody else, but Roy Scheider's all the way to the left. Technically where a star is, who's first. Dreyfuss is definitely last, but Shaw is slightly above, even the poster had trouble in production, right? Even figuring out where we're putting people's names on said poster was a problem for arguably one of the greatest movies ever made, Jaws, Steven Spielberg's classic, 47 years old this year, Rich, and we're about a month away from it capturing some sort of weird, it's going to go back to the box office, it's going to go back swimming out into nature, and as part of Spielberg's big 40th push for E.T., we're getting a 3D Jaws and an IMAX Jaws at the end of the summer, which is just the 3D Jaws. I'm like, how and why? IMAX, yes, if you're going to upgrade it and make it bigger and you could put the work in on it, fine. But 3D, I'm like, I don't know, but I'll probably end up seeing both because I love the movie, right? I mean,
I'm fine with the IMAX idea if they keep the initial aspect ratio of the film. If they're just just blowing it out to the full IMAX screen, which is a more square image than the wider screen image that Spielberg shot this in, I'm afraid it's going to just kind of screw with a lot of the composition. And this movie is such a perfect, delicate balancing act of so many elements that even just doing something like that, where you could, kind of throw
there's
some
enough to question it. It's enough to be nervous.
Yeah.
Especially if you love the movie. And I think, it's one of those movies that, Jaws doesn't necessarily have fans. Jaws has converts, right? When you're young, you're afraid of Jaws, and then you see Jaws, and then for the rest of your life, you're somebody that shows Jaws to other people, right? I mean, that's the gist of it. So first, before we get started, let's welcome Joe. Joe, good evening, John. We missed you guys last week. Yes, Rich was doing his very cool Philadelphia Film Critics Circle duty, going to a screening.
So much a duty of the film circle, but just my average duties as a writer and reviewer online for my site, FilmBuff Online. Had to go see a screening and got to write about it a little bit. Yeah.
CJ's I go to the beach, but I don't get in the ocean. True story. What's guys? That is what's up. I'm sorry, this is what's up. Yeah, no, that's true. This is one of those movies that has that whole vibe to it. We're excited to be back. Thank you for joining us. We are a Generation Movie presented by the Indie Escape Network. First off, let's get that out of the way. If you like our content, please subscribe to TIEYT at youtube.com, Indie Escape Network. We're happy to be here with Joe and CJ, Brandon, and all the other great talent. David Madison, didn't want to forget him. Scott Chiaffo, a bunch of people.
And they all,
Joe, and all comes together.
And the Indie Escape Network also has their Facebook page and Twitter account, where you can also
right there
find out information about upcoming shows, not just ours but elsewhere. So,
and they have a lot of good things going on. We have it's all over the place, and we have a lot of good things going on with the Indie Escape Network. Joe's working on some things, getting us gigs at some conventions, and we're also working with CJ's got a big thing coming up in Texas with some Texas Chainsaw Massacre folks. That is going to be a great charity event. Going to be a lot of fun. You're going to get to eat dinner with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't know that I trust it. I mean, it's Texas barbecue, but I don't know that, but it is what it is. You're going to eat. You're just going to go. You're going to go and hope for coleslaw would be my guess. But we're happy to be here on a Wednesday night. Thank you for joining us. And what is there to say about Jaws at 47?
That hasn't been said for the last 46 years.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was thinking about it. Like the last big, well, first off, it's going to get it's going to be a big to do this summer. At the end of the summer, we're going to be talking about Maverick. We're going to be talking about a couple things, the viability of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're going to be talking about a couple things, but 40th anniversary of ET and Jaws coming back to theaters in IMAX and 3D is going to be a major topic of conversation, if only because many people don't get to watch the movie on a big screen. So I thought it would be good if we did this in the middle of the summer, celebrating Jaws' 47th anniversary, and wet the beak a little bit if you decide you might want to go check it out in IMAX and 3D. We got some more people popping in. Let's say hi. Oh, no, CJ. CJ said Kings Island, Texas on July 23rd for Chainsaw Jerry's 80th birthday. It's also Harrison Ford's 80th birthday today, so Chainsaw Jerry and Harrison Ford have things in common. Joe says, thank you. No, thank you, Joe. And then CJ says, trust the meat that weekend. If you say so, CJ. I don't know. You're from Texas. You're in with Texas Cannibals. Just saying. I'm sure it'll be fine, though. I don't know. I probably go baked beans and coleslaw. Anyway, but that's just me. That's just me being a little bit scared. Let's start production. It is what is it? A warning? It's a word of warning about functioning special equipment. But the production of Jaws is widely regarded as one of the single hardest shoots in the history of film. I mean, 159 days, 100 days over schedule, over budget, with a kid director who just made his first movie, and who also the Sugarland Express, and who had made a television movie that was pretty popular called Duel, and was basically cutting his teeth on her anthology shows with aging stars like Joan Crawford, and just comes in as a ball of flames, right? Trying to get the movie. They have other people in mind, though. They're like, he's not the first choice when they're deciding to make this movie, right? And that's one of the great stories. Basically, even the way it gets found, the book was working to come out, and Richard Zanuck and David Brown, both at Universal, they basically came across it at Cosmo. Like, every story I've read is the most weird. It's just a weird concept that one of them was married to Helen Gurley Brown, who ran Cosmo. They ran an excerpt from the book, and she put an edition of her magazine with her husband and said, "Hey, this book might make an interesting movie." And that's where it started. So they optioned it out. They pay him $175,000 for Jaws, that seems like a steal, Rich. Yeah, that seems like a good investment on your money.
That was a lot of money in those days for book rights.
A huge amount.
But
but after they get the excerpt, they read the entire book. They purchase the rights in '73 before the book's out, right before the book's publication. And basically, they read the book once. And one of the stories that's always interesting is that they read it once, and Brown always said in interviews that if he had read it twice, he might have thought twice about buying it for how hard the shoot was going to be. And then, so the filmmakers they consider John Sturges, who directed The Old Man and the Sea, the Spencer Tracy version. They had offered the job to Dick Richards, Culpeper Cattle Company, which had come out the previous year. And Richards got fired and pushed off the project because he kept on calling it a whale. The movie about the whale. And Brent Zanikenberg just kicked him out. So it's an interesting story that Spielberg comes in to work on something else, or maybe right after Sugarland, and it's sitting on their desk. And he asks about it, and it's just from the making of the book, The Making of Jaws. Basically, he goes into it and says, "Hey, I really want to make this movie." He just made Duel. He's like, they're both similar movies, similar things, and Zanuck and Brown fell for it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah,
he jumped in.
Duel really is kind of like the
land Jaws.
Westworld. It's the way Duel is to Jaws what Westworld is to Jurassic
Park. Yes.
It's kind of a dry run of the concept and the tone of things. And even though in both cases we didn't know we were getting the next thing, but they're almost like proof of concept, and then they take the themes and the ideas.
And Duel is fantastic. Duel holds up remarkably well. It's tense. It's on abandoned roadways in the American South that are just terrifying. And it
came out so well they released it theatrically in Europe.
But Spielberg, heard rumors, heard buzz, didn't want to become the truck and shark guy, right? Those are always things that happen. He had set up to do another movie called Lady Luck at 20th Century Fox, but Universal had his contract. And so Universal, at that point, directors were under contract. At that point, Spielberg was under contract. That's a funny thing to hear, right? Spielberg now does whatever the hell he wants, when he wants to. People have to ask him for breath. But at that point, he was under contract to Universal. They pulled the rights on it.
Too, he came out of college and he was hired by Universal to direct. And that's because he was basically being bounced for a couple of years, like through 71, 72, being bounced around among TV shows, including his very first credit is actually a Marcus Welby episode. And then, of course, he did the Night Gallery premiere and then another episode.
That's with John Crawford. Yeah.
Including an episode of Columbo, which I think we're probably going to touch on. The reason that's going to come back into the story in just a little bit, I think.
It is. But so we have some more. Hello, Brandon. Good to see you.
Good evening, Brandon.
Duel is an underrated classic. Dennis Weaver and the film don't get enough credit. That's absolutely spot on the nose, as Rich is pointing out. That's a great everyman versus intimidation movie. So Spielberg gets signed on. He eventually gets in. And I think, the screenplay is one of the unsung heroes of Jaws. And they give Benchley the first crack, right? Benchley comes in and he bombs. Like he's the writer of the book, but he can't make characters work. He can't focus things. He has trouble getting anything from the page to the screen, right? And doesn't understand how people interact on screen.
Yeah,
it's bad.
Yeah, screenwriting is a very specific discipline, and not everybody can do it, even when you can write in terms of a novel.
Terrifying novels.
Yes. And if only because, in novels, you can kind of give more of the character's inner thoughts and inner emotions, things like that. Screenplays, you just have to say what is being shot. Here's a line, da, 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 da. And sometimes it's up to the actors to kind of lift it off the screen, off the page, and make it come alive. But sometimes
and directors to be able to
aren't even there, then you're in trouble. And
Benchley didn't have it.
Yeah, Benchley didn't have it. And yet, what, he took three cracks at it? Did three drafts?
Three drafts. And each one of the drafts, Spielberg looked at it and just went, no, these are terrible. And basically, one of the things that Spielberg wanted that was Benchley couldn't get around. Spielberg had always envisioned it as a 3-act film with first act, first attack, second act, town reacts to attack, third attack, fishing expedition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically, he wanted it to work in a way where you look at a movie and you go, there's camaraderie there. There's some, like a Sea Hunt, which is an old TV show that Spielberg really loved, where you need humor and you need stuff to get rid of the darkness. And so in that respects, he turns to Carl Gottlieb.
Well, he goes through a couple of other writers. He approaches
major writers, Columbo writers, yes.
Yeah, the 2 creators of Columbo he kind of approached, among other people, to kind of do a draft, and they all kind of turned him down. And then we go to Carl Gottlieb. Because
Howard Sackler as well, like a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, also kind of, he did an uncredited rewrite of one of the Benchley drafts that was absolutely he was one of the people that came up with the idea of giving Brody the idea of being afraid of water. That basically this guy that's from the concrete jungle doesn't understand living on an island near Massachusetts. You know what I mean?
And that makes sense too. That's a nice character.
That's a great character. Yeah.
That gives us so much through the film.
It's something that Benchley didn't bring to it. Benchley didn't understand texture or character in the screenplays.
I love, though, it seems almost counterintuitive. Like, okay, how do I want to juice up my my killer shark movie and make, and strengthen the character bonds and everything? I know. I'll go to the guy who used to write for the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour.
The guy who's writing the Odd Couple now.
Yeah.
But the Odd Couple thing is kind of a weird, when you look at Carl Gottlieb, he was doing a lot of work on the Odd Couple at the time. Mm-hmm. Spielberg sends him the script. He looks it over, and he's looking for levity that's like kind of a bonding guy levity. And when you take in the concept that he worked on the Odd Couple, and then you start to piece together the Sea Hunt stuff and the drinking on the Orca and the pieces, all the pieces sort of fit into place with what Spielberg's looking for, right? And you kind of start piecing together how it's going to work, how the script is going to work. And the script comes together eventually. Spielberg, as with all these movies in the 70s and 80s, Spielberg takes a pass. Although one thing that has always been smart about Spielberg, he doesn't necessarily, he may take a pass, but he doesn't force his pass, right? Sometimes you hear about directors from the 70s and 80s. Spielberg doesn't force his script ideas onto people. He asks people to come up with something after he gives them what the vibe he wants. Spielberg is a master manipulator in that regard. Of this is what I think it needs, right? He can polish it up and make it, basically they do a dialogue polish. They figure everything out. And Carl Gottlieb eventually becomes the primary screenwriter of the movie.
Yeah,
he gets
Gottlieb is one of 2 people on this film who I have to give the most credit to for making it exactly amazingly what it is today.
Are you going with John Milius?
No, it's not going to be Milius either.
Well, Milius, so that's one of the biggest.
We'll get to it.
No. But Milius comes on he does some polishing with regards to dialogue as well. And then also the writers from Sugarland Express, Matthew Robbins, Hal Barwood, also made contributions. So Spielberg brings in a vast arsenal of people, and he could pick his own draft, but he doesn't. He ends up working. Gottlieb becomes whatever. And one thing that they did make massive changes from the book. Spielberg demanded that it have a big ending. It needed a big ending. Like in the book, the shark takes a lot of damage and just kind of dies in the ocean. And so Spielberg does come up with the idea that we need a big, rousing ending, like something huge in a movie. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then the final script has 27 scenes that were not in the book. The final script also excises the really dumb, not dumb, but over saturated romance angle between Hooper and Brody's wife. That gets dropped. Hooper dying gets dropped. A couple, major things get dropped out of the screenplay.
Wasn't in the book there a mob subplot or something too?
There's a mob subplot in the book, but that's
gone.
Right, that's mercifully gone. But I think one of the greatest aspects of the screenplay of the Jaws that makes it still relevant today, right, is the small town America political game. You guys live up near Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is a big politics town. I live down here in Florida, which is a big political. But the idea of the small town politics of a tiny town kind of careening into itself, and just kind of like butting heads over trying to protect people. I can't imagine where it's come into pass in the last year and a half or so. Where
last 2 years, where
politicians kind of just pushing people, saying, "Don't worry about it, just get in the water."
Politicians putting people's safety at risk for keeping businesses afloat and profits coming in.
Yeah, I can't imagine where it might come to pass, where it makes it one of the most prolific things. Jaws, Jerry, thank you for joining us. Jaws set the precedent for every shark movie made after. Tino Torero was one of the early ones. Yep, great movie. And then Peter Benchley also wrote The Island, another great movie. Michael Caine. He also wrote The Beast. I think didn't he write The Beast, which was like a squid movie or a squid book?
Yeah, yes, he did. That was back in the 90s. I remember.
Yeah. There was a TV miniseries. Wasn't there a TV miniseries? Anyway.
Yes. I remember because I was freelancing at the Times Leader in Wilkes-Barre at the time, doing entertainment features, and I remember that the tapes came through for that. I took them home and watched it, and I have no memory of it beyond that, though.
Yeah, you definitely wanted to MIB that. Just take a light and just please make me forget. So what I do want to discuss really quick about the screenwriting. One of the most respected parts of Jaws is a great monologue near towards the end of the movie about the USS Indianapolis. It is one of the biggest places of controversy during any time that this movie gets talked about. There have been all kinds of internal debates. There's an article written in the Hollywood Reporter recently where basically there's a fight about who wrote what from the U.S. Indianapolis speech. Carl Gottlieb makes a fair point that I think he came up with the concept, but Shaw fleshed it out mostly himself. John Milius always said that he had written it, and then Shaw, he manufactured a little bit of it. But Gottlieb has always stood by the concept that he wrote it. And he came up with the concept, but Shaw is the one that actually sat down with specifics and fleshed it out, right? Because Shaw's...
Personally, based on what I know about both men, Gottlieb and Milius, I'm more inclined to believe Gottlieb's version of the events rather than Milius's most likely ego-colored recollections of the events.
It's a really interesting story though, because it is one of the great moments. Gottlieb got the idea from a book. A shark. He basically, a guy captured a shark in 1964, wrote a book about it, and he just basically came up with the backstory as Quint, as a survivor, as Sackler. Howard Sackler was one. He came up with a great idea about Brody not wanting to live on the water, like not liking the water, and he came up with the backstory that Quint was a survivor of the Indianapolis disaster, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a fantastic thing that Robert Shaw. Gottlieb saying Robert Shaw came up with most of it, because Shaw did some playwriting himself. But it's been a fight. It's one of those fights you see in all these great movies where somebody says something was great and then everybody kind of like flickers about how it got there. And it reminds me a little bit. We did The Thing a couple weeks back, and it reminds me a little bit of whether or not Childs is the thing or not. It's that kind of debate that just rages and fuels fire. But
I mean, if somebody were to hand me everybody's drafts, we could probably figure that out fairly quickly as to who wrote what. I don't know what's on file at the Marion Herrick Library in Los Angeles in terms of
Drafts. Yeah, no, that'd be interesting.
And such from this movie. I would love to, just as a film scholar, would love to kind of like crack into Universal's files and see what they have. Maybe that would kind of settle this debate.
Maybe. But I think the Shaw writing his Indianapolis thing, that leads to casting. Spielberg definitely steered away from stars because he had stars circling the movie on all plates. He was turned down by some stars, right? So Spielberg set out with I think he was like working at trying to cast Quint, right? He wanted Brody to be played by Robert Duvall, but Duvall only wanted to play Quint. Charlton Heston tried to get any of the roles, but Spielberg thought he was just too big. Because at that point in the 70s, Heston is starring in everything under the sun: Planet of the Apes, Soylent Green, The Omega Man. He's got a larger-than-life personality. And then Roy Scheider basically walked his way into the part at a cocktail party, which is an amazing whatever. And then,
but he was well known enough to be able to have some marquee value because he had already done Pitch Connection in the 7-Ups. So people kind of had an idea of what Roy Scheider was, which is great.
Right. Robert Shaw getting Quint is also interesting because there's a story that was told by his family. Basically, Zanuck and Brown had just finished working on The Sting with him, and the script and the book got passed to him by his wife and his secretary. And the story goes that they basically passed him the book and the script, and the only other time they were both unanimous in making a pick for Robert Shaw, it was from Russia with Love, which is incredible. And I guess as time gone by, Shaw has said they were totally right. They were right about From Russia with Love. They were right about Jaws. They're the only two roles in my career that I was totally sold on in every conceivable way by the two women in my life, which is an interesting side note because, you don't think of Shaw, blustery Shaw, drunk Shaw. You don't really think of him as like somebody that would listen to the women in his life, maybe. You know what I mean? Maybe the stereotype, but that's how he got it. And then Hooper, Hooper becomes the de facto Spielberg person in the movie, right? He becomes the people considered it ridiculous for Hooper. John Voight, Timothy Bottoms, who was big at that time, Jan Michael Vincent, Kevin Kline, Joel Grey, and Jeff Bridges, all considered. But
I could see Bridges or Kevin Kline. I think those two would do
humor. Right, there's a humor to them where they can be charismatic. But of course, Spielberg has this friend named George, and George had worked on this movie called American Graffiti, and they got Dreyfuss the role. Now Dreyfuss wasn't going to take the role, right? That's the rumor, right? He had just done Duddy Kravitz, and the reviews were okay, but not as what he was predicting. Although as the time progressed, the movie got better reviewed, and he basically accepted because he was afraid he was never going to work again, which is ridiculous. It's like for this cast to come together with Shaw being, Scheider at a cocktail party overhearing stuff, Shaw getting told by his wife and his secretary, you should do this, and Dreyfuss being pitched by George Lucas and then not wanting it, but then taking it because he was afraid he wasn't going to work. It's like, when we talk about these movies, Rich, it's like the fucking stars are aligning. Like it's just everything comes into place and works perfectly, except the shark. The shark doesn't work at all, Rich. No. And as they start filming in Martha's Vineyard on May 2nd, 1974, nothing works. The sharks there are many sharks. I think there's 15 of them made for the movie. Some of them have up to 14 people controlling them. And the whole point of this being a tough production,
basically giant monstrous puppets. And that were allergic to salt water, that had pneumatic devices that couldn't be clogged with salt water, that were broken
that didn't work. And basically, so the shoot becomes a terror because they have days where they're not getting any shots. And they have an Academy Award, soon to be Academy Award winning editor, Verna Fields, waiting on stuff to edit. And some days she would get nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And other days she would get 5 scenes. And some days she would get nothing. And so it becomes this storyline where it's just endeavor after endeavor of problems.
Yes. Well, Fields is the other person who I'm thinking is the absolute secret sauce in this movie.
The architect. Yes, the architect.
Yeah. I mean, just watching how she constructs certain scenes, like the first town meeting after
Alex Kintner.
After Alex is, chomped up. There's a lot of overlapping dialogue and cutting back and forth, and it almost has an Altman feel to it, in the way that it's just kind of like.
I always think of it as Preston Sturges. Everybody's got their own thing to say, like a Preston Sturges comedy. Like, I know it's a serious effort, but there's so much going on with conflicting overlap. It's like a His Girl Friday. Like, one guy jokes with the check. Will she take? Is it cash or check? Like it's overlapping. It's crazy. You have everybody's doing their own thing. Like, people find some things funny, others don't. Like it's a madhouse in that first sequence.
Oh yeah, I like that idea, the Preston Sturges. I hadn't thought of that. I was, maybe because I just recently rewatched MASH, I was thinking of like how that has a lot of.
Altman's modern day Preston Sturges. So, yeah, it works. But I think old timey like Cary Grant-ish stuff.
Yeah. But also, despite that like really heavily edited sequence, you also have other sequences where it just plays out in the master for almost the entire sequence. Like when they're down on the beach with the mayor and they see the billboard that's been defaced and everything. That's one long shot from like where they walk up to the mayor, then they walk up to the beach up onto the sandbank, and then they see the thing, and then they react to the billboard and everything, and then the mayor walks off, and that's when they cut. The scene continues, but that's when they, make the first cut in that scene. And so
the sequence at the dinner table. The whole sequence at the dinner table with 2 or 3 cuts situated around focusing on the camera, either on the dad and the child, which is easily one of my favorite shots in the entire movie. Give us a kiss because I need it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's beautiful. It's cinematic gold.
And then just the way she builds tension at the beach. One person walks in, there's the dog, and the way that starts to build and build and build, and the way she edits fast action during the shark attacks when they're out on the boat. Everything, this requires a lot of different editing, and she brings a lot of different editing styles to this. And whoosh,
it may be the most finely edited film ever made.
Yes,
like it's a masterclass in it. Brandon makes a comment. Hold on, Brandon makes a comment. Solid film commentary about greed over safety and will be a focal point in many films similar type over the next decades. Collateral damage always suffered due to potential profit a greedy figure is seeking. Yeah, the mayor is as relevant today as he was then. But like you're saying, the editing. Get back to the editing. Let's go back.
She wins the Academy Award for this, rightfully so. And unfortunately, she retires. Now, I could see going out on top, going, I'm done. I've just done. I can do no more. I can kind of, understand that. But I sort of wish because she also did Sugarland Express. So I've always wondered, what would Spielberg's other movies have been like? I mean, okay, Close Encounters is great. But after Close Encounters, we get 1941, which there are things about it I like, but I'll say, it's a mess. What if she was still working with Spielberg at that time? Would 1941 have been a more coherent film? Would that have worked better as a film?
That's a hell of a question. That's an amazing question. And we haven't before we leave production. We do have to. It's an incredible question because I think Verna Fields, like Sugarland Express and this both hum. If you haven't, that's another thing that should be mentioned. If you're watching a movie show where we're dissecting these movies, If you've never seen the Sugarland Express, it's Goldie Hawn, it's William Atherton. It is a fantastic bit of cinema about. It's kind of like a more serious Raising Arizona, is the best way to describe it.
I like that.
Way more serious, Raising Arizona. And then Brandon brings up a fun fact. Fun fact: during filming, Lucas got his head stuck in the mechanical shark he used to draws. That shark, by the way, is named Bruce. Had to get pried up by Scorsese, Spielberg, and John Milius. After which they thought they broke jaws and ruined the production. That's theoretical. Like, the problem. Here's the thing: the shark doesn't work. And what happens, Rich, on this production? 159 days. Right? It was supposed to be a 55-day shoot. Goes to 159 days. The budget balloons from $4 million to $9 million, right? Which is double, right? And $3 million just to problems with mechanical sharks. They even have to, like, one of the great stories you read about the production. But here's the thing: you read about it in the production, the sharks break, and it forces Spielberg and Verna Fields to get together and discover how much they like Hitchcock, and how much it's not going to be a Ray Harryhausen monster movie. Mm-hmm. It's going to be an Alfred Hitchcock thriller because I don't have my sharks that work. And so the production, the horrors that happen on the production, focused in and makes everything better. Even the moments you do see the mechanical shark, you don't give a shit. It may look fake for a moment, but it's only on screen for 2 or 3. Like, it's not on, like, the first pass is only, like, what, 10 seconds? The Jaws chomp with Quint, you barely see anything. That's only, like, what, 20 seconds? You know what I mean? Like, the shark is, because these dumb sharks wouldn't work in the saltwater, which, by the way, also one of the greatest. It's the first movie to ever shoot on the ocean. And it's like, why would you do that at that time? You know what I mean?
No one has learned their lesson since. Anytime you shoot on open water like that, it's going to be a trial. I mean, like, movies like Dead Calm do it, but again, they had issues. Waterworld famously had all sorts of issues.
But like some of the best water movies have done tanks. Like you look at The Abyss or things like that. There were good ways around it, but the idea that Spielberg stuck to his guns and was able to churn out this movie with all the problems that these sharks caused.
Speaking of Hitchcock's own open water movie, Lifeboat, they just did that on a stage with a real projection. And it works. It works for its era.
In doing research for this movie, so doing research, you find out things you never knew about it. That's the other thing about Jaws that makes it amazing, right? You rewatch the movie, you see things you didn't see. So I'm going to give a little tidbit. So I never had realized that Spielberg shot the Ben Gardner sequence, Ben Gardner's boat, right, in somebody's pool in California, using a latex model, right, of the actor, and then they made the water murky by pouring powdered milk into the pool. It's an amazing, like, I never would have guessed that. And it's like the horrors of this shoot where, they called it flaws. It also led to one of Spielberg's biggest superstitions, right? Like, Spielberg never attends the last day of shooting for any of his movies. And the reason he didn't was because the entire crew was going to throw him in the ocean from this movie. So he skipped the last day of shooting to avoid it. And that has become a Spielberg tradition. He does not go to any of the final shoots. But after 159 days, production ends. Spielberg has his own money in it. You know what I mean? And, and they did some test screenings. They're working things out. The Ben Gardner sequence is added after test screening because Spielberg doesn't think he has enough. They also, I don't know, this little guy comes on. John Williams comes in.
Heard of him?
Yeah, he's kind of a famous dude. And he has a meeting with Spielberg where Spielberg thinks he's joking when he says, I'm just going to do, I don't know, 4 notes. I'm going to do 4 notes. I think I can do 4. It's like
I can write that tune in 4 notes.
I can write that tune in 4 notes. And Spielberg thinks he's kidding, but then he finds a way to do it. He does it with a trombone, and he just changes everything. And the birth of one of the greatest movie scores in the history of movies is born. The greatest thing about it is that Spielberg and Williams decide they're only going to play this particular score when the shark is doing something. So you have this incredible thing during production and post-production where they tie the music, and it's one of the first times it happens. I mean, it certainly happens in other films after it, right? It happens, the Michael Myers music is iconic and sticks with that character, right? And only when he's really chasing after you or whatever is the music playing. But Jaws is the first one to do it. Jaws is the one where they said, whenever you hear this music, someone is in trouble in the water, which is incredible. And I can't get over how much trouble they had in this production. We've gone way over budget on time with regards to the production because the production is crazy. Brandon writes, it's a funny thing that Bruce didn't work most of the time. Yeah, if you listen to Richard Dreyfuss talk and whatever, and we didn't get into production. There was a lot of fighting on set as well that should be broached at some point. Maybe we'll do a Jaws episode part 2 because we do need a bigger boat apparently. But Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw, the tension between them is real. It's a real tension that spills over into the movie because
it's a large thing that the shark didn't work well. Ultimately,
it's a beautiful thing. So the movie opens. We go to our next place. I can't find it. Give me a second. So when you're researching these things, you find out amazing things, right? And one of the coolest things about Jaws is that Jaws at the box office and during the opening, it is one of the first films, actually the first film, to do national advertising. So when you go and you watch your television this week and you see Thor ads or you see Minions ads and they're all over the country for the same movie, realize that Jaws did it first 47 years ago with 30-second ads that played on primetime TV networks between June 18th and between the movie's opening. They spent $700,000 on that. They spent $1.8 million on marketing for Jaws with ridiculous things, like beach balls and shark's tooth necklaces, games, posters, iron-on transfers, hobby kits, toy sharks, shark costumes, blankets. And basically what happens is that it comes out at 400 screens. Rich, at this point, no movie opens on 400 screens. The way it works is you open in major cities, and then the movie spreads out and hits all the little theaters all over the country. But Jaws opens on 400 screens, 464 to be exact, 409 in the United States, the remainder in Canada, right? And it becomes a sensation. It becomes the highest grossing movie of all time. It basically goes to a test screening, and after that test screening, 2 test screenings, and then third, and then all of a sudden, all the changes, and it becomes the movie it is right then and there. And
what was the ultimate box office take on that?
What was that?
What was the box office take on that?
Opening weekend, it opens to the massive $77 million in its opening weekend. 21 in its first 10 days, basically paying for the entire film. $100 million in its first 59 days at 954 theaters. At 78 days, it passes The Godfather as the highest-grossing film ever at the North American box office. And basically, it does that with Godfather earning $85 million. Jaws overtakes it with 86 after 78 days. And then it becomes the first film to earn $100 million in U.S. theatrical rentals. It spends 14 consecutive weeks at the number 1 film in the United States. Unheard of. 14 consecutive weeks is unheard of. The only movie that's close now would be something like Maverick that has minimal, but it hasn't been number 1 every week.
Yeah.
It's unheard of. It's an unheard of statistic.
It's insane. And when you look at those totals, you think, oh, 7 million, that's not too bad. I mean, you have to remember the average ticket price
It was a quarter.
for a movie ticket was $2.03. So for an opening weekend of $7 million, you had 3.5 million people come out to see this movie
At 400 screens.
on 400 screens. So the per screen average, I'm not doing the math in my head, but had to have been pretty amazing and had to have been crazy. And, this is the era of the modern blockbuster right here. This is what starts it.
And the other thing, Godfather made all its money in the winter. The summer at this point in Hollywood history is where they drop garbage movies for drive-ins and for whatever, and movies that are going to play out the summer, because nobody cares about going to the movies.
Yeah, that
during
people
the
are
summer.
out going to the beach. Instead, they decided to go indoors to watch people at the beach.
And never go to the beach again.
Oh yeah, I would say that's definitely one of the legacies of this movie.
Yeah,
How many people were just like, nope, not going to the beach.
This is a good question from Brandon. Brandon asked, gentlemen, in your opinion, what is the greatest shark-themed film outside of Jaws and not an animated film? Brandon, I was going to go Shark Tale, but I was going to go Nemo. Nemo is a great shark movie because Bruce is funny, and his name's Bruce, and he's named Bruce after the shark. Fisher friends on food. The greatest shark.
Can we go with Suicide Squad and King Shark being in it?
I'm gonna. No, I don't know. I don't think that's what he means. No. I don't know that it's a shark film, but I think I'm going to give you a shark film that I think is ridiculous, but I consider it brain candy and just silly, wonderful madness. I'm a big fan of Deep Blue Sea, even though it's cheesy hot garbage. Sometimes I love cheesy hot garbage. I mean, look at my size. I love cheesy hot garbage. But I like Deep Blue Sea. I also think you could get away with Open Water, which is kind of well done, kind of upscale horror. Ken writes Sharktopus. No. If you come to me with Sharknado or anything like that, I immediately go no. Other shark movies, trying to think. That's a hard question, Brandon.
Yeah, because you have obviously.
Brandon agrees with me. That's good. Brandon and I, we sure agree. Deep Blue Sea, I think, is underrated because if you're asking me what's the scariest thing ever, sharks with massive brains because we're trying to solve Alzheimer's is a great way to go. Also, it's the most ridiculous concept, and it also has LL Cool J, and it also has a parrot. Hard to beat. And Thomas Jane. Thomas Jane is underrated, and he's really a lot of fun in this movie. And the idea, once you watch the movie, and I'm not ruining it because it's been out a while, but if you watch the movie and realize that the whole concept of the movie is that the sharks are lowering the gate, is the whole concept of the movie. They're not actually trying to kill anybody. They just want to get out of the goddamn facility where they're being tortured and their brains are being enlarged against their will. I'm just saying the sharks might be right.
Yeah, I'm thinking Deep Blue Sea because otherwise you're looking at Jaws sequels, which progressively get worse.
Jaws 2? Yeah, but Jaws 2 is not actually. Jaws 2 is up.
Is okay, but it's the start of the slope before they just falls off a cliff. Then
Joe Ridley says the Meg. I think the Meg's too funny.
It's fun.
Meg's too ha-ha. Statham,
a scary
big
movie.
shark. And then The Shallows. Yeah, I think
Shallows, Open Water, maybe.
We've had some scary shark movies recently. So, not really a shark movie, but I liked Orca. Orca's an interesting movie too, but that is a, And then what else? Shallows were great and watchable. Same with The Reef. The bar goes way down after Jaws. Even with the Jaws sequels. I agree. I think you run into a problem. Jaws, as we've explained throughout the entire episode, Jaws sets the bar incredibly high for lots of things. It sets the bar high for screenplay. It sets the bar high for editing, music. It's really hard. And everything that comes after it, you're like, I could be watching Jaws. And that's a horrible thing to say, but that's the truth, ain't it? Like when you're watching stuff, like
yeah.
don't as you and I are both critics who watch a lot of movies. Is there moments where you go, I could be? I was talking about it today on my other podcast. I was talking about it Loud and Nerdy. I stumbled into the Indiana Jones quadrilogy the other day, where I was watching Raiders, and then I clicked on the little box that you click on to find out what's going on with your cable, and I found out that they were running all of them together. And I didn't have any plans, and my wife was saying I could do whatever I wanted, and I ended up wanting to watch all the Indiana Jones movies. It wasn't my fault. It just kind of happened. And Jaws is the same way. If Jaws is on, I will watch it from wherever it's pinpointing from. I, in turn, also this year started a tradition that I'm going to continue. I don't like fireworks. So July 4th for fireworks for me is out. I've now decided that July 4th for me, going forward, for anybody I love, trying to get them to watch it, is going to be Terminator 2, Jaws, and then Independence Day. I think those are 3 ways to go. I think it's a good July 4th bevy of films, and each has different ties to what I view July 4th being right.
But to get back to what you were saying, though, if you're watching any other movie and you start thinking about another movie, like if you're watching
Jaws, Jaws could be that movie.
If you're watching Into the Blue and you're suddenly thinking, well, I'd rather be watching Jaws, the filmmakers have failed. And you should move on. You should move on. Yeah, you asked me if I've had a recent experience with that, and I can say Monday when I saw The Gray Man, which is a mishmash of stuff. It's coming out on Netflix. It's in theaters for a week starting Friday, and Netflix next Friday. And it's
Netflix is pushing the idea that they have a franchise here. So they don't have a franchise? Okay.
The movie ends with nothing being solved. Absolutely nothing. The hero went through everything for no reason whatsoever. And it pissed me off.
That's amazing. Okay, hard to be original with shark movies, true. And then Brandon chimes in with Burrow so how Jaws, millions of people will never went into the ocean or even lakes again. That's all true too. And that's what we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there, Brandon, with Legacy. Hold on, we're getting there. So movie comes out, it's a massive hit. It has one of the longest theatrical runs. It just crushes everything. It also came out for 40th anniversary, where it got re-released to theaters in 2015, and it's also, as we talked earlier on the show, slated to be reissued on September 2nd, 2022 in IMAX and Real 3D. And it's the first summer event blockbuster. It is adjusted for inflation. It grossed $472 million worldwide in 1975. Adjusted for inflation, it was at $2 billion in 2011, right? And so it's well over $2.5 billion now with adjusted gross. And every time it comes back out, it gets to add to that total and get closer to being it's right in the anywhere from top 10 to top 20 movies of all time. Which leads us to our next portion. So it comes out, it's a massive hit with folks. Where are we at critically? And again, it's one of the few movies. If you look at Rotten Tomatoes, it's at 98% for God's sake. And the
2% who
are those? Yes, who are those assholes? Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to definitely say they're assholes, but because hey, not everybody likes asparagus, but I'm interested into what their criticisms, what their issues are.
I think the I'm always fascinated by that.
When you have a film that's nearly universally acclaimed like this is, I'm always interested in what is that contrary opinion. Sometimes it just comes down to, oh, I couldn't plug into it. It didn't work for me. And that's, which makes film criticism, of course, very personal. 98% or so love the original Star Wars, but for some, it was like, oh, this is juvenile. They just didn't connect.
Okay, I lied. I'm sorry. It's at 97.
What?
97. I lied. It might have changed. It was at 98 when I checked earlier.
I saw it as being at 98 like yesterday or
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was definitely 98. So wait.
Though? When it's a 40-some-year-old movie.
So the one of them is recent. A couple of them are recent.
Yeah, who's the jerk coming in like today, hot and angry?
Yeah, hot today. Actually, hot today. Riveting special effects, marginal acting by Robert Shaw, and an Academy performance by the Shark. If you like animal acts, Gary Jane Hosington.
Given that,
wow.
Okay. I may grant him some understanding with Robert Shaw's performance, because I think a little of him like just saying shit left, right, and center as like they're loading the boat and stuff can go a long way. Once they're out on the sea, I can understand. But there's like that whole segment where he's just like this and that and the other. Shark.
Well, okay, I'm going to be honest. This guy doesn't get it at all. So there's another one. I'm looking through the critics right now. Charles Champlin, Los Angeles Times. It is a coarse-grained and exploitive work which depends on excess for its impact. Ashore, it is a bore, awkwardly staged, and lumpily written. I'm going to tell you right now, Rich, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think the Ashore stuff, for me, as I progress through my life, the Ashore stuff is super interesting. The idea that the coroner says it's a shark attack, and then he goes and he comes to him and says, we can say it's you'll sign off on that? Yeah, I'll sign off on it. And then the guy comes in from the Oceanographic Institute and goes, it wasn't a boating accident. You guys are liars. I can't think of something that's more apt for today, right now, than finding out politicians are lying about something.
Mm-hmm. And I honestly, I don't understand how this critic can say that Jaws relies on excess for its impact when this movie totally derives so much out of, as we've talked about before, not being able to see the shark. It's all about the tension and the mood created through the editing and not through like the occasional bit of gore that you see, like when they hold up the arm that was bitten off, and from the first attack or stuff like that. That almost feels out of place from everything else in this movie. It's almost like
I found the last one. Hold on, I found the last one.
Okay,
last one is from 2002, June 5th. Kenneth Robinson of The Spectator. To be fair to this film, and I can't see why I should be, it is an improvement on Peter Benchley's book. These are weird reviews.
But he still doesn't like the... Okay, well, let me click on what he had to fully... Oh, I'm not reading all of this.
No, but I think it's far more interesting that when we're looking at critical response then and now, you and I are only focusing on stuff that's negative because there's only 3 people, Rich. There's like 170 reviews. There's only 3 people who are like, I didn't like the Ashore stuff. And I got to tell you, the more I watch the movie, I think I love the Ashore stuff more than I don't like it more. I'm lying, but I can see the intricacies of the Ashore stuff that make it special. It got a perfect rating from Roger Ebert. He gave it 4 stars. A sensationally effective action picture, scary thriller that works all the better because it's populated with characters that have been developed into human beings. And you go back to what we talked about earlier with the script, right? You have the playwright Sackler come in. You have Gottlieb come in. You have all these people kind of coming in and just polishing up pieces. And when they all come together, it creates this wonderful thing. Let's see what else. I did see, like, the negative reviews are so... Oh, and the guy that disagreed, the Champlin character from Los Angeles Times, he didn't like that it was PG. It's too gruesome for children and likely to turn the stomach of the impressionable at any age. And then he said, it is a coarse-grained and exploitive work, which depends on excess for impact. Ashore is a bore, awkwardly staged and lumpily read. I disagree with that dude wholeheartedly. But again, out of all the reviews you see on Rotten Tomatoes, those 3 people are the only people that have a problem with Jaws.
it's
Wild.
weird because he's the LA Times critic that we're looking at here wrote this in 2013. PG-13 had obviously been around for 20 years at this point, almost 20 years, and
It's
30
tame, though.
years.
This
And-
movie's tame compared to other PG-13 stuff, by far.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a PG, obviously,
This
but
was PG initially, and why he's beating up on the rating is beyond me, because that kind of displays absolutely no concept of what a PG movie was in the
70s.
Yeah,
It's
were
a real,
a lot more gory than they are now, and
way more gory.
there's a lot more casual boobage in these things too, which we didn't get here. But that kind of
Wait a
stuff.
second, Joe's chimed in. Joe's dropped in a bombshell here. Hold on.
Okay.
Asshole here. Popping pin that's going to catch me crap. I watched Jaws a couple of years ago after 20 years, so I just think I don't think it holds up today. Joe, we got to talk. Joe, when we meet up for Phantasm, we're going to talk about this crazy idea that Jaws doesn't hold up. Let's see.
I literally watched it 3 hours ago, and it holds up. Okay.
Not that it takes away from its major cinema accomplishment and stuff. That's true. Like the interesting thing, it sets a precedent for Tough Shoot. It sets a precedent for the way it changed how films are released, and the way it changed national marketing for films. And then what else? Let's see. Ken chimes in with, would Jaws be as good if it didn't have the soundtrack? Sometimes the score makes the movie. Yes, but also I would agree with that, except for the fact that I think you could have put not that it wouldn't have been perfect, but as Rich pointed out, I think the Carl Gottlieb script and the Verna Fields editing, whatever music you put on it, it was going to work. Because the actors, I think this. Don't get me wrong, the soundtrack and Williams, he's an ace that every filmmaker wants to have, right? He's the ace that you throw down on the table and go, also, I got John Williams. Take that. You know what I mean? Like, he wins every card game for you.
There's growing up, I remember on one of the nightly news magazine programs, they were doing a feature on John Williams. So this is about 1982 or so, and they wanted to illustrate how his movie music is effective in creating mood. So they took the same shot of him walking down a street in Manhattan and then turning and going into I think Lincoln Center, the plaza. The first time they showed it, they had the score of Raiders of the Lost Ark playing, and it's just John Williams walk along, but dun 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 dun, dun, and you feel something and you imply something about what he's doing.
He's going somewhere to the Lincoln to do something.
Yes. The next time they showed it, they stop, they go back to the beginning of the clip, and this time it's with the Jaws theme. And same guy walking down the streets of Manhattan, but suddenly it's a lot more ominous. And I think maybe Williams' score is what helps sell this movie more so than maybe anybody else having a score in there, despite, the fantastic editing, the script, the direction, and everything else. It's one of those little pieces that just kind of give it that extra little to get it over the top.
It's a cherry on top. It's an ace. It's an ace that Williams and that Spielberg and Lucas have been able to throw on top of their deck. They flick it out. It's an ace. He's an ace of every color, right? So, well, the critical response is crazy. I think it's one of the more interesting things that we had three guys that just, no, I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't get it. I don't care about your stupid leg. But then let's talk legacy franchise viability. Now, first thing I have to discuss, it has 3 sequels. One is okay. Jaws 3D is awful. And Jaws the Revenge is arguably the worst sequel ever made for any movie. Also the reason why Michael Caine was not around to get his Oscar. And that movie can go F itself. Personally. It's a terrible movie. It's got shark revenge themes. It's ridiculous. They show the shark way too much. It attacks not only a banana boat, but also a plane, which is just ludicrous. So the legacy isn't there, but I will say the legacy that I think jumps out is the idea of summer blockbuster, the idea of national release, heavy advertising on television, franchise marketable tie-in items that go a long way. It also is the reason we're going to see movies in the summer. Every major hit for most years prior to 1975, movies were big hits in the winter, fall and winter, Oscar season, which is now Oscar season for us. Jaws and Star Wars changed the paradigm. People go to the movies if it's a great movie. People go to the movies in droves if you have a bunch of great movies playing. It starts the summer blockbuster.
Yes.
It also sets Spielberg's career on the trajectory that, to be honest, hasn't stopped.
No.
He's still giving us. I mean, if you went to theaters this past December and watched West Side Story, or if you haven't seen West Side Story yet, and you don't think you want to watch West Side Story, you should, because he's great and it's a great movie. And I can't wait for Meet the Fabelmans. I can't wait for whatever he does. I've been Spielberg's been in my blood since day one on this planet, and I will be like, my dad ran a theater that ran Jaws, and but other legacy moments, things. I think the prime season for films in the summer. I also think about all the terrible animal scare movies we got. And when Alien was sold to Market and sold to Fox, it was Jaws in space. You know what I mean? When you had movies like Orca, Grizzly's a great movie. That's such a wonderfully campy, amazing, wonderful. It's about just a killer grizzly in the middle of what I think Yellowstone. Mako, the Jaws of Death, Barracuda, Alligator. You know what? I might change my vote if we're going with best shark movie, even though it's not a shark movie. Alligator is a wonderful homage to John Sayles trying to do the best Spielberg, and Spielberg doing homages to legacy. Spielberg, by making Jaws, actually lifts Hitchcock up, because Hitchcock is the template by which this movie kind of creates all its tension. It's part of the reason, and I don't know if anybody knows about this, but it's part of the reason that Hitchcock and Spielberg never met. This movie, it's an incredible story that basically Hitchcock didn't want to meet somebody that he thought was good, and was told that Spielberg was kind of cocky and didn't want to meet him, and Spielberg was afraid to meet him. All Spielberg wanted to do was to meet Hitchcock, and apparently they only ever exchanged a letter, right? There was only a letter ever exchanged, which is a real interesting thing. That the legacy of it is that these two filmmakers, it's so good that the greatest thriller horror filmmaker of all time felt that the kid was better than he was, which is crazy.
Yeah. Jaws became such an immediate pop culture thing.
Point.
Zeitgeist. It just hit the zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist is a great word.
Ridiculously so. That even today, you can reference the movie like comedically, and people will understand what you're saying. I mean, starting like, I can't remember what year it was, but one of Bob Hope's specials that he did on NBC was partly a Jaws riff called Joys, Joys, because hey, we're telling jokes, it's funny. It's shit. It's what it is, and it's available on YouTube if you hate yourself and you want to go look at it. But I mean, in 1980, Airplane, the Zucker Abrams a fantastic film. Airplane opens with a Jaws parody of the clouds and then the airplane fin going by with the Jaws music playing, and then boom, like that. As the plane kind of flies over the camera. Kevin Smith, references Jaws and Clerks with Salsa Shark. And then in Chasing Amy, What are two? Or I'm sorry, in Mallrats. What are the two main male characters' names outside of Jay and Silent Bob? Brody and Quint. So
Yeah,
in Chasing Amy, they do a riff on the Shark Attacks scars, but
I did this. Yeah, I did this in the car. Yeah,
the sexual scars thing.
It also has a fest. There's a Jaws fest in Martha's Vineyard. There are at least 3 musicals that are based on Jaws and a play that Ian Shaw, Robert Shaw's son, wrote about his father making the movie from notes his father left. It is a wonderful, amazing piece of cinema that actually doesn't ever kind of like it. Again, I can always find something new when I'm watching Jaws. Let's see what we got. We got some more stuff. Ken asked that really great question about the score, which is interesting. I'm not sure if I've seen this real Photoshop. Jaws being shown at the beach, people in water and inner tubes. That's happening a lot. That actually happened. That happens every summer somewhere. You can find it.
A few years back, the folks at the Alamo Draft House were doing screenings of films at specific locations. So they had like this portable inflatable movie screen. And if you lived in Wyoming, you could go to Devil's Tower and watch Close Encounters on a big inflatable screen with the actual Devil's Tower right behind it. You could see Clerks in the vacant lot across the street from the actual convenience store. Unfortunately, that vacant lot now has a condominium complex on it. And they did a Jaws screening at Martha's Vineyard with everybody in inner tubes in the water.
Let's see what else.
Those, but they sound like a hell of a lot of fun.
Sound like a lot of fun and also terrifying because I'd be like, everything that nibbled on my toes, I'd be like, fuck, get me out of here.
Well, I'm a location tourist to begin with, so.
That's true. I know you are. If they only had 66 Batman shark repellent, laugh loud. Joe, we got to talk because you said you didn't think it holds up, and I'm worried about you, concerned. I love it that it's viewed in every man actor like Rorschach as a hero. Actors like him, even in this day, aren't standard in Hollywood cast heroes. It's usually action star types with good looks and muscles. This is where we were talking earlier. This is where the Charlton Heston thing comes in. If you're asking me to cast Charlton Heston in this movie, although the Quint actors were interesting, the two that Spielberg really wanted were Lee Marvin, which I think would have been a real interesting Quint, though not the same as Shaw, but interesting.
Yeah.
And then
a much harder edge to him.
Yeah, it would have been a totally different Quint. And then Sterling Hayden, who most people who watch our show in my generation know from 9 to 5. He's the boss that shows up at the end with Dabney Coleman. Scheider stands out as a great talent on top of a blockbuster that wasn't typical type. Kudos to him and Amy Dreyfuss and Stack. Yeah, it's an incredible. Scheider's tough, but also an everyman. And I think that's one of the great things about the movie. Like, it is a traditional man versus nature. Like, in high school when you're reading the books and your English teacher's going over, like, all the different types of stories. And they do man versus man. Yeah, what's kind of conflict? Is it man versus man? Is it man versus whatever? Man versus nature. This is the ultimate man versus nation action thriller horror film. Let's see.
But
Brandon also
on other levels, though, it's oh yeah, you're right, Brandon. I did forget.
Baseballs. It's all over the place. And the thing is, Jaws. What were you going to say, Rich? Because you had something.
But Jaws is also man versus man when it's Chief Brody versus the mayor. It's also man versus himself as Brody is overcoming his fear about being out in the water and everything, and he has to overcome that fear in the third act. It's all of those things.
That's the other thing about it. When you're talking about masterclass, a masterclass in editing, it's a masterclass in music, it's a masterclass in overcoming obstacles that happen on film sets, and it's also a masterclass. And this is kind of weird, but in like the structure of having 1 act, 2 act, 3 acts, right? Being able to focus a movie where you can walk into Jaws and know what act you're in, right?
Mhm.
Once they get on the orca, that's the final act of the movie. And what I would also say is pay real close attention. When the shark starts attacking the boat, my favorite story that I unearthed during all my research. So, have you ever seen The Shooting Stars, Rich?
No, I have not.
Okay. So,
Sorry.
I don't know if they're both real. I don't know if they're manufactured. I don't know anything
Oh,
about it.
you mean in that shot where they're
There's
looking up and it goes.
Well, there's 2 shooting stars. So I don't know. Okay, so Spielberg, the story I read and heard about was he used to ask Martha Vineyard's people, like boatmen, and for stuff that was like superstitious, because Quint is supposed to be a Martha's Vineyard, guy who works on a boat, right? So one of the things they came up with, and they told Spielberg, was 2 shooting stars means bad luck for a fisherman. So if you watch, there's a moment where Roy Scheider, after the Indianapolis speech and after the Scar session, the shark attacks the boat at night. The yellow tube comes up and it attacks the boat, and it kind of like fries the gears and everything. Sets up for the final act the next day, right?
Yeah.
Roy Scheider goes to get something out of his bag, and there's a shooting star behind him, right in the shot. So it's a close-up shot of Roy Scheider right here.
Yeah.
And then the shooting star goes over his head. Then the following shot is the orca with the boat, like the boat and the barrel, and there's a second shooting star. And Spielberg either had them and put them in, or put one in, or had one that was real. Because one looks real. The one looks specific, like really real. And he put a second one in to honor that boat story he got from the Martha's Vineyard fisherman, which it's one of my favorite things.
One thing I noticed when, because I hadn't watched it in several years, and I wanted to rewatch it, and I got busy, and that's so I raced home this evening and watched it. Literally finished 10 minutes before we started here. And one thing I noticed, there's a lot of foreshadowing in this movie. We talk, we'll make the joke that, the whole Anton Chekhov
gun in the shot. Yeah, the gun has to be used in the third.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put the gun on the mantle. First act, you have to shoot in the third. And then you just replace, it's not Chekhov's gun, it's Chekhov's fire extinguisher, Chekhov's pitchfork, Chekhov's whatever. And, and here there's so many things that get set up and paid off. And one thing that I kind of had forgotten about and really just made me chuckle really hard is when the orca is leaving the docks, they cut back to Quint's house, or Quint's shack, or whatever that is, his office, what have you, that has all those shark jaws, different types of shark jaws on the wall. One of them is on the window, and we're looking through the shark jaws at the orca. Which, yes, Spielberg's
happy
totally
accident, or did he do it intentionally? And the thing is, when you watch those things, right? When you watch those things, it's an amazing, like everything. No matter how much he suffered on this movie, everything works. Okay, Joe's chiming in for one last time as we finish up on Jaws tonight. I'm here as a comic relief. In all seriousness, the movie scared the shit out of me as a kid. Moved from Long Island on the East Coast to Florida at age 8. Everyone surfed here. It took a lot to get over the fear of water because of the movie. I learned to respect the ocean and was an avid surfer. Glory days. Yes, I go to the beach. But that's the thing. It set in motion the Hollywood blockbuster. It set in motion the fear of water. It also, and kind of negatively,
I would say people were afraid to go into the ocean by Jaws almost as much as people were afraid to take showers after Psycho came out. You heard a lot of
there's two really big lasting legacies that we do have to discuss. One, this movie is one of the movies that's used to test people in dealing with scary situations, how people will react to movies and how movies induce stress in regular people. This movie is one of the movies that's used to test that, which is, I think, is a real interesting thing in the research that we did. And then the other thing that is kind of a negative connotation, negative legacy, more for, both for the book and the movie, is that people hunt sharks. We are now in a negative part of the legacy where people are not hunting sharks as much. We're now studying sharks. We have Shark Week. We have all these things. But at the time when this movie came out, and in the waning years after that, before we found a newfound discovery of like what intelligent animals they are and all that other, there was quite a purge that Jaws caused because Jaws set them up as the most dangerous predators on the planet. And it is something that has to be discussed. Peter Benchley, in his waning days, when before he died in 2006, said, I really regret the amount of shark blood I might have on my hands that I might have caused scaring people, the world over. So, but Jaws is one of the defining summer blockbusters of all time. It still is. I watch it I'm going to watch it every July 4th going forward. I also watch it whenever it's on, to be honest. If it's on and whenever I catch it, it's whatever. I love everything about it. I love Dreyfuss. I love Shaw. I really love Shaw. I love Roy Scheider.
And if you can't wait to see it this at the end of the summer with the Fathom event coming up, it is available right now for streaming on Peacock.
Yeah. I don't think it's a Fathom event. It's not a Fathom event. I think it's getting released. Both E.T. and Jaws are getting released. Like it's a reissue. It's a reissue. They'll be taking up regular screens for the end of the summer. So I don't think it's a Fathom event. It's not like The Thing. Yeah, no. This is a major. This is like this is a major push for the 40th anniversary ET, and Universal's flexing some of its muscle. And respect for Spielberg. We still have an ET ride, for God's sakes. We were on that the other day. But Spielberg, I can't even bring into words. He's easily my favorite director. I love a lot of directors, but he's the one that I grew up with that I've always gravitated towards. Even his worst movies, I would argue with anybody, are better than most of the movies we get. So Jaws is, though, at the top of his list. It's one of several that are easily regarded as, monuments, just incredible monuments. And then Brandon writes, killer show, keep them coming, rock on. Thank you, Brandon. You keep them coming too. Give me 1 second. Hold on. Where's my thing? Because I know Brandon's got a big show coming up this Friday too. And I want to make sure we get that in. I love plugs. I love taking care of people and making sure everybody's happy. Brandon's got a big show coming up this week. Hold on. Who's he got? Brandon's got somebody. Where are we at? I get the memos and then I lose the memos because I'm not really good with technology. I hate technology, Rich. I want to become a Luddite, but I like technology. But I don't like technology. Does that make sense? I don't know. It's messy. Hold on. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
I thought he sent me something, and now I can't find it. Oh, this is terrible. I'm wasting time, but I'm also trying to waste time. Also, if you're watching, that's who it is. Is Jeremy London coming up this week? Mallrats 45.
Wow. Speaking of Kevin Smith and Mallrats,
I don't know if you sent me or something or not, Brandon. But Brandon does this great show called IOU on Friday nights. It's an amazing show. He has people from all walks of life, all walks of the industry come on. And Brandon is one of those young cats that gets it. I'm an old cat. You're an old. You and I are old dogs. Brandon's a new cat that gets the tricks, and actually the utmost respect for everybody involved in this business that we love so much. And I urge everybody who watches any of my stuff to watch Brandon's stuff because he's really careful. He had Oliver Gruner on, a great interview from 2 weeks ago that I really loved. And Brandon does a good job. So he's on Friday nights on our network, and we really appreciate everything he does, and also appreciate that he pops in and chimes in cool stuff for us on a weekly basis. I appreciate you too, Brandon. You stay out of trouble. And then, so Jeremy London this Friday on his show. Where can they find your stuff, Mr. Drees?
Okay, all my writing is at FILMBUFFonline.com. I should have a review for the Russo Brothers, The Gray Man, dropping tomorrow. I believe the embargo lifts at noon. So if I finish it up this evening, you'll see it right at noon. Probably by the end of the... no, I don't think I have anything else for this week in terms of review.
Just got done with Blobfest too, didn't you? You got done with Blobfest
this past weekend. Had a blast as always. If you like good old fashioned 1950s monster movies, look to go to Blobfest in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia next year. You'll get to see the Blob. You'll get to see some other science fiction films as part of double features that weekend. There's a lot of other fun activities. Next year, I'm sure I'll be pimping it as it starts to come around as the details start to become available in the spring. The other podcast that I do, the Big
Picture podcast.
Big Picture. Yeah, wow. It's been a long day, dude. I'm sorry.
I understand. I got
Thank you. I'm going to get yelled at by Natasha tomorrow, too, my co-host. The Big Picture podcast is at bigpicturepod.com or a link right there on FilmBuffOnline.com. We haven't had a new episode in a couple of weeks only because...
You guys are filming.
We're filming in 2.5 weeks.
It's going to be good.
But hopefully Natasha and I will find some time to sit down in front of a microphone soon, talk about a lot of the movies that we've seen recently. And I can be found on Twitter, just shoot my mouth off about movies, TVs, and lefty politics at FilmBuffRich.
So I'm a JWPA movie guy on the Twitter with the tweeting. I also can be talking about different things, picking movies up, looking at all kinds of cool stuff. We do Loud and Nerdy, another podcast that we do on Wednesday nights at 8. Please join us every week. We have all kinds of fun stuff. Also, we have a Loud and Nerdy group on Facebook that is burgeoning, growing every day. And they do their own polls now. I don't even have to go in. It's like I'm a proud daddy. I just kind of show up and I cultivate all the nerddom that goes on in the Loud and Nerdy group on Facebook. And it's just a great group of like-minded people who like movies and stuff. And TV, pop culture, anything you want to talk about, comics. And we do that show every week, Loud and Nerdy. And you can see us here on the Indie Escape Network. And again, with Indie Escape stuff, you're looking at...
What are we doing next week? What movie are we doing next week?
We are doing E.T. next week.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, yeah, no, you're worried. You're worried. Did I actually do the banner for it? Hold on. Yeah, look.
All right.
Yeah, next week, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. So, Summer of Spielberg continues. We're 3 weeks in on Spielberg, just Spielberg stuff all the time. Poltergeist, then Jaws, then E.T. It's perfect. Whatever. And also, if you're looking for cool things, Indie Escape Network, folks. I can't talk about it enough. Next week, we got E.T. Indie Escape Network is where it's at. You can find them on YouTube, CC Indie Escape Network. Also, you can find it on the Facebook page, facebook.com, indie escape. Oh, it's amazing. We're happy with our new network. Very happy with everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Stay out of trouble. Have a good rest of whatever. Lots of movies coming up. E.T. will get you prepped for all that big stuff that's going to happen in August. E.T. in August is going to be huge because it's going to be dropped into a bubbling cauldron of movie going coming back. We'll see what happens with E.T. Maybe it can cause a ruckus on the charts. I'd like to kick Cameron, just kind of give him a punch, just ever so slightly. So Brandon says, nice, E.T. phone home, hashtag E.T. phone home. Yeah, Brandon, so let's get that started. Me and you'll start that hashtag. Have a great night. Have a great Wednesday. See everybody next week for E.T. Bring
Take care.